Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session. So glad to have you on board. We're talking about iPhone and privacy and security. So a couple of things to discuss for us this afternoon. I hope you got next hour or so set aside so we can go through all of these things. Welcome again to our session. Before we get started, as always, a couple of things to mention, which is firstly, hi. You can definitely chat to me. So you use the chat panel in Zoom and you can reach out, say hello, tell me where you're joining from, tell me which iPhone you have. And by the way, there's also a dedicated Q&A option. So if you've got any particular questions, then you can definitely use that to let us know. On top of that, if anyone is keen to become a host of their own and iStore meets, do reach out to our team using the email address on the screen. We definitely like to hear what you got to share. And talking about sharing, also you can share and win. So definitely make use of the hashtag iStore meets when you post anything you've learned on Facebook and Instagram. And you can win some great prizes. So let's get started. Welcome again to our session. My name is Marius. So nice to have you on board. And I think let's start our session by quickly just mentioning that, iPhone is really built with security and privacy in mind. So, the hardware and the software and the services, all these things are made so it gives you the best possible security and privacy on a mobile device. You got access in terms of what you share and control over those things. So that's what we're going to explore in this session. We'll see what are some of the built-in things on iPhone that you have access to that Apple kind of provides. On top of that, we'll look at, things that you can control. And also, I think we'll end the session with a couple of, more general, I think, tips and tricks. So security, by the way, it doesn't matter the device, really. There's always a part that you still have to play. So it's almost like having really good car security. But if you leave your keys lying around, essentially, you are going to put yourself at risk. So there's a few things I think we can also do just to make sure we are as secure as possible. So welcome again. We start with the basics. So we're going to have 4 things to chat about before we get into some of the more advanced things. But these are, let's call it the fundamentals of security on your iPhone and things really everyone should be getting it right to give yourself the best possible chance of being private and secure. So let's cover these. There's about 4 points, and then we'll move on from there. And the first one really talks about that passcode on your iPhone. So I think many of you enter this many times a day, potentially. And maybe you've got a really weak passcode there. Maybe you got 1234 or maybe 0000. So one thing to keep in mind here is this is like pretty much like the keys to your device, right? So if someone is able to get into your device using this passcode, actually they've got access to many parts of iOS and even things like your passwords that's stored in keychain, which we'll talk about later. So definitely make sure that this is a strong password, not something that someone can easily guess, like birthdays or anniversaries or something like that. And also make sure you at least upgrade to 6 digits. So I know at some point they started at 4, which were some years ago, and maybe you've just never changed your password all those years back. And, so definitely go for at least 6 digits. It gives you like millions of combinations. And if you really want the ultimate in terms of security here, you can even change it to, you can see on the screen there, custom alphanumeric code, which means you can put in words, even a sentence, to unlock your device. Something to be mindful here in terms of this passcode, and this is something unfortunately that is happening, is it's called, shoulder surfing. People are potentially looking over your shoulder, trying to see if you unlock your phone, what that code is, because if they then had to snatch your phone, for instance, they can actually then make use of that and to get into your device. So kind of be careful, treat it like a bit of an ATM pin almost, right, in terms of this passcode. Okay, so let's move along. That is kind of the first and important one to get right, but I think we can move on from there. And we know there's some newer technologies as well that help us, so we don't have to put in that passcode all that often, right? So I'm talking, of course, of things like Face ID and Touch ID. And I think the good news here is Apple has really kind of made these to be very secure. For instance, Face ID, it doesn't just unlock using a picture of your face. I mean, actually, it's quite advanced in terms of what it does. That's why we have that notch on the top of the screen. There's lots of little sensors in there, including a dot projector. There's an IR projector in there. And essentially, these form like a 3D map of your face. So it's not like anyone can just use a photo of you or even a video to unlock it. So definitely make use of these. Even your fingerprint, for instance, these are not stored in the cloud. So that's also good to know. This is stored on the device in a little place called the Secure Enclave. which is encrypted. And also you'll know this is the case because every time you set up a new iPhone, for instance, you have to go through this process again, right? You set up either your fingerprint or your facial recognition. So it's nice to have these available and definitely make use of them. By the way, you can also do watch unlock. So this is something that is kind of newish. If you have an Apple Watch and you have an iPhone as well, then you can use your watch actually to help you unlock your iPhone. And this is really for those instances where you are using Face ID and you're wearing a mask. And it is going to allow you to still be able to unlock your iPhone without having to remove your mask, so it can scan your face. So it does make it a little bit more convenient. So a nice one to know if anyone has got both of those devices. Also want to touch on something here that is interesting to maybe just be aware of, is that you can also disable Face ID and Touch ID. And you might be saying, well, why would I want to do that? This is something I really hope never ever happens to anybody, but if maybe your biometrics is going to be used against you, you can actually disable them. So for instance, if someone is going to, scan your phone towards your face to force you to unlock it, what you can do is if you press both the buttons on the side, so the power button and either of the volume keys, and you just hold them down for like a couple of seconds, you should see a little screen that comes up, pretty much it looks like what is on the screen at the moment, which is allowing you to switch off your device, but also at the same time, it is going to disable biometric authentication. So once you maybe cancel that, the only way to get back into your device is by using that passcode we spoke about a little earlier. All right, so a couple of things. Let's talk about another one, which I think is really crucial, and that is about software updates, making sure your device is always up to date. It's a really key part of being as secure as possible, because there's always updates that include security updates. And obviously we know there's new features to come out, but also when there are software updates, Apple usually also includes security updates to these. So what you can do on your iPhone, let me quickly show you. If I jump into the settings app here, and I'm just going to go into general, and you'll see about and software updates. So a couple of updates there. As you can see, mine is turned off at the moment. What you can do, and what I actually recommend, is you turn on automatic updates. And there's actually two options there. One is to check for updates and download them automatically. And secondly, you can also have them installed automatically. So this is great. So it means essentially your phone will always be up to date. And this is not going to happen during the day or at some point where you might need your phone. Usually what happens is when your phone is on Wi-Fi and also on charge, I guess at night when you are sleeping, this is when these updates will take place. So definitely encourage everyone to make sure your devices are up to date as possible. The current version, if anyone is maybe curious, is 15.02. All right, so that's the current version. Already a couple of updates came out since iOS 15 was released. And again, they are also mainly concerning security. So definitely something to go and check out. All right, so keep your phones up to date. And the final thing I said, if you remember, I said there's like a couple of important things to do as a foundation, and it's kind of the final part to that. And this is to enable two-factor authentication on your devices. So what is two-factor authentication? Essentially, it's a great way to keep your information safe because it's adding like a second layer of security to your device. So even if someone has, let's say, your username and password to your iCloud account, for whatever reason, maybe they've able to get that from you, they still can't access your account unless they have a second device that they can use or a second method to use to unlock a device. So this could be a second device that you have, or maybe just through SMS or something. But the point is, you can't just have these credentials and log in. And yeah, important to do this, especially with your iCloud account. So if you wanted to do this, if you've not turned on two-factor authentication yet, you need to head over to the settings app, tap on your name at the top of the screen, and you'll see there's an option for passwords and security. And kind of behind the code at the moment, there's an option that says two-factor authentication. And this is where you can turn on that option. Alrighty, so those are kind of the basics, right? So a couple of things to get us started with. By the way, welcome to let us know in the chat and also in the Q&A if there's anything particular that you want to still chat about. But let's move on. And I do want to talk about controlling what you share on your iPhone. So there's a few things that you've got access to in terms of you can control what apps can do, what they can't do. And let's explore some of these things together to make sure you are familiar with all the options. And the first one, which is, I think, an important one, let's go out of our settings app there for a second, back into the home screen. Let's talk about privacy settings. Essentially, there's one place in your iPhone that controls all the privacy settings that's got to do with all the different functions, what apps can do in terms of, let's say, the microphone and the camera and Bluetooth and even your health and motion sensors. So where do you find all these things? As you can see at the bottom of the screen, you need to head over into the settings app. And then if you go back all the way to the kind of the main top level menu, you'll see if you scroll down a little bit, there's an option that says privacy. So this is essentially the one place where all of these controls are available for you to go and check. And we're going to explore some of them. I think maybe importantly, and a lot of people are particularly concerned about something like, their location information. So, what do apps have access to? So this is where you can go and see exactly what apps have access to in terms of your location, the GPS information on your phone. So, and what's really cool here is it's really on an app by app basis. So you can do it very nice and granularly. And what you can see here, for instance, is you can go into any of these apps. So for instance, if I go into Facebook, for instance, if it wants my GPS or my location information, I can say, well, either no, right, I don't want you to have this information. I can say, which is probably the default for most of the time, is going to be, yeah, it's okay while I'm using the app. So if I'm actively using the app, you can have access to my location. If you want to maybe be a little bit more aware of when this is taking place, when apps are requiring your information about your location, you can change it to where it says, ask next time. So essentially, every time Facebook wants to access information, you'll get a pop-up and says, well, Facebook wants to know your location. Do you want to allow it? And you can do that. And there's also one more which got introduced with iOS 14. You can see right at the bottom, it says precise location. And this is quite a cool one, because you can then tell an app, well, you can have access to my location, but I'm not going to give you my exact location. So as in your street address, it'll probably know the neighborhood that you're in. So for a weather app, I think this is a good example. It doesn't have to know your exact location. As long as it knows roughly where you are, it can still give you accurate kind of weather information. If you are talking about an app like maybe a GPS app to do your navigation, like Waze, obviously it'll have to have precise location in order to work properly. But there's a few more things here to chat about. So this is under the location services. So your GPS information essentially on your device. We'll talk about tracking in a second, because it's also one that got introduced more recently with iOS 14.5. So this is a particular one that is really kind of a little bit new and very useful as well. But before we talk about that, let's quickly look at some of the other things here to know about. For instance, Bluetooth, your camera, your microphone. And again, you can go and see, maybe you can do a bit of a health check essentially and make sure that you're comfortable with what apps have access to which different things. Maybe another one to maybe just mentioning is even photos. So what you can do with photos is you can tell an app to not have access to all your photos, but maybe only to specific ones, or maybe to an album. So you can say, well, this photo is asking to get access to my whole library. Maybe you can just make an album that you put the photos in that it needs, and in that way you can still limit the amount of access it has. So you can see there's quite a few things here to go and explore. Camera as well, and by default, just so you know, like apps don't have access to these things. So it's not like they come installed and they have access to this already. So you would have had to at some point given them access. So at least you don't have to worry about that in terms of just being on in the background. But it's probably a good idea from time to time just to make sure you're still happy with the settings that you have over there. The other one we spoke about a second ago was this tracking information, right? So what is this whole tracking thing? This is actually called app tracking transparency. So what happens is you can actually see it says here on the top there. So what apps do, or what they want to do, is they want to build a profile about you in terms of what are the things you do on your device, which other apps are you using. It kind of is able to track you across different apps and services essentially. So Apple has kind of seen that this is probably a problem in terms of privacy, and they've given you a way to then not allow that. So how does it work? You can see I've got one there at the moment, which is Facebook. But if I open an app that I maybe haven't used before, and this only kind of asks you once, really, let's go into the app here. Let's say News24, which I just downloaded, I think a little bit earlier today. What you probably will see is a little pop-up. There we go. that says, well, News24 would like to track your activity across other companies' apps and websites, right? And I think the data that we're seeing, which is probably to be expected, as most people don't want that, right? And this is where you can then set that setting. I can say, ask app not to track, and by doing so, it's going to limit the capability of the app to track me across different apps and services. If I head back over to my settings app, and let's quickly refresh it, you can see there we go. We've got both those apps showing me that those are the settings that I've chosen. If you just want to turn it off altogether, you can also do that, right? So it's not going to ask you at all. It's just going to turn it off completely. So you can also do that towards the top of the screen, right? So that is also a nice one to be aware of, and definitely something I would kind of make sure that I don't allow, right, from a privacy point of view. Okay, so let's move along and talk about some other things that you might be kind of looking at. And this is an important one, is you can actually see whenever your device is maybe actively using either the microphone or the camera. So in most cases, you probably will be aware of this. So if you are on an active call, for instance, you will need the microphone. If you are maybe using the camera, you will use the camera, right? So those things are quite obvious, but sometimes, and maybe there's a time where you are not using any of those apps, and maybe there's an app that tries to use this in the background, right? So actually your phone will alert you to this. And what happens is, let's quickly do this. I'm going to quickly search for an app called Voice Memos to show you what happens, right? So there's a voice memo. Just say, okay, there's a few updates. And if I press on the red button to start a new recording, I want you to look on the top of the screen towards the top right-hand corner. It might be a little bit hidden there, actually, based on my little demo screen here. So actually, that's not going to show you. So let me show you real quick where to find this. Actually, if I swipe down from the top of the screen to activate my control center, it'll show you actually Voice Memos recently used my microphone. So if you see an orange dot, that's going to be your microphone. If it's a green one, it means your camera. But also, if you, let me actually show you, there's another way. There's the dot we were looking for earlier that unfortunately was hidden based on my little mask on the screen there. But essentially, if you see that dot, if it's green, it means something is using the camera. If you're seeing an orange one, something's using your mic. And if you're not expecting that, then simply go into Control Center, and you can see which app it is that had done that, right? So, so definitely something just to be aware of. Right, I see there are a couple of questions coming through, and we'll definitely see if we can make sure we get to all of them throughout the sessions. Let's quickly deal with this one though. So I see someone from Anonymous here is saying, do you need to update privacy settings per device? Or once you update it on one device, it's also a link. So no, it doesn't actually sync over to iCloud. So these are device specific. So if you had to change the setting on one of your devices and you've got multiple devices, that data will not sync over iCloud. So you're gonna have to do it again on your other devices as well. So I hope that answers your question there. All right, so so let's move along. We've spoken about app tracking transparency already. That's a kind of important one that we had looked at. Let's quickly talk about notifications. So in terms of controlling what you share, what people can see, I guess, and maybe glance on your phone, this is a nice one to be aware of, is that you can change what those little notifications show. So for instance, I think you'll all be aware when someone sends you a message or when there's an email that comes through or essentially any notification, it kind of appears on your phone, right? It shows you on the lock screen, or maybe it kind of does a little banner on the top. So what you can do on your device is you can go and change like what you want to display in that little notification. So if you head over to settings and then notifications, and then there's an option for show previews. What you can do is, and this is especially useful on an iPhone with Face ID, you can tell it, as you can see highlighted there, to only show previews when your phone is unlocked. So essentially, if your phone is lying on a table, let's assume, and maybe you're just kind of busy in a conversation and there's a notification that comes through. So essentially that notification will stay, I guess, hidden in terms of the contents until you, with your face enrolled on that device, look at that device, at which point it'll unlock and show you the contents of it, which is great because if, again, maybe you get up and your phone is still on the table and there's a message that comes through, no one will be able to see the contents except for you, essentially. But also what's nice to know is you can also change this on an app by app basis. So maybe what you want to do is not have it default to one kind of solution for everything. As you can see towards the bottom, you can then say, well, maybe for these particular apps, maybe for your banking apps or maybe for your messaging apps, you want to hide them. but maybe quite happy for a news notification to come through, even if your phone is not unlocked. And or if your phone is locked, and you can then still have them come through like that. So definitely go and check them out. Let's see, someone is saying, does deactivating or activating previews affect Apple CarPlay's ability to read what app messages whilst driving? That's actually a good question. So I've not tried that one particularly, so that's something I might have to go and just double check for you. So it's a very good question in terms of that. But I'm guessing when you've got Apple CarPlay turned on, it is kind of, your device is going to be unlocked to kind of have that function work on the screen of your car. So maybe I think that is still going to come through. But nice one for us actually to go and just double check on. So thanks for that. All right, so moving along, let's talk about a few more things. This is got to do with sharing your photos. So as you know, if you take a photo, it usually includes location information again, in terms of where the photo was taken. So every photo essentially has got metadata that travels with the photo. So this is like the date and the time and the aperture of the, the camera and all the things that make up the photograph. But also it's got maybe privacy or private information, things like, the spot that you've taken the photo. So if you've taken the photo at home, for instance, maybe of your dogs, and you are sharing that photo, right? Maybe there's a concern here around sharing your address together with that photo. So just to be clear, for most messaging apps, this is actually stripped out by default. So they do kind of, for instance, if you send a WhatsApp, that doesn't travel along with the photo, but it depends how you share the photo. So for instance, if you email the photo, it is going to include all the information. Or if you iMessage the photo, for instance, that'll actually give you a complete version of the photo. So what you can do as you are sharing a photo, you can go into your Photos app and you can select the photos to share. You tap on the share button, you'll then see the screen that's currently on the screen, which is, okay, well, how do you want to share it, right? With email or AirDrop or whatever. You'll see right on the top, there's a little button that says options. So this is actually where you can go and specify some of those extra little things. So I can actually tap on options and I can say, well, do you want to include location information? Do you want to include all the photos data, including all the things, as you can see at the bottom, metadata, keywords, descriptions, etc. So you can go and manually kind of override that if you wanted to do that. So just be aware if you are sharing photos, I guess, a little bit wider, and it is maybe photos of like your house, or maybe your dogs, or maybe your family around your house, that might just be something you might want to go and turn off. All right, so let's move along and talk about a few more things in terms of controlling what you share. And one of them is just actually being on the internet, right? As you browse the web, similar to what we saw earlier in terms of that app tracking transparency, right? What companies do is they try and build a profile again about your browsing history. And what happens is they've got these little things on websites that are called, trackers. You've got social trackers, you've got ad-based trackers, and essentially they kind of know about your visit and then try and kind of establish a little bit more about you, trying to figure out who you are in terms of a unique identifier of your device. This is obviously going to help them to maybe sell you more targeted ads. So what you can do, and actually this happens by default, is the Safari is going to, in fact, have your back there. So as you are browsing the web, so let's say you are browsing a site here like News24. This actually is the app. Oh, no, it is Safari. So, sorry, let's go back there. What you can do is you can see at the bottom of the screen, there is a little and a big A. So I can tap on those and you can tap on those. And what you'll see is there's an option that says privacy report for trackers prevented. So just by coming to this one website, essentially, Safari has already prevented trackers from viewing things like your IP address, as you can see there, and more. And you can actually come in here and it'll show you all the trackers and the websites that are being kind of blocked in the background. So this is nice because this happens kind of automatically. You don't have to worry about this. It's not that you have to turn it on. Essentially, Safari will be blocking and also giving you some insights in terms of what is happening with regards to these trackers. I see Yvonne has helped us there on the chat real quick about our question earlier on CarPlay, saying it's a separate CarPlay setting. Your previews on your phone can set up not to pop up on CarPlay. Okay, so it seems like there's a separate setting for that. Thanks for clarifying, Yvonne. All right, so we're talking about Safari and the privacy report built in. the other important one, which also I think we use almost daily, is going to have to be mail, right? So your Safari, internet browsing, and then you're probably going to be doing some emails. So the good news here is that also this is new with iOS 15, by the way, that there is some new privacy protections also from a mail point of view. You can see there's an option that says protect mail activity. So this is setting you it's turned on by default again, as soon as you install iOS 15. So you don't have to turn this on or off. It's kind of there already. But if you wanted to go and find it, you're gonna have to go into your settings app, navigate to where it says mail, and you'll see an option then it says privacy protection if you just want to make sure it is on. But what does it do? So essentially, if you're receiving mails, let's say from e-commerce sites and social media sites and newsletters, all these kind of emails, what they do is actually they embed little, it's tracking pixels essentially. And, these are part of the marketing messages. And this little tracking pixel essentially allows them to monitor information like, how long you've spent on the email. Have you read the email? How long you spent on it? Have you actually opened the email, for instance? And other personal information like your IP address. So what this does actually is going to hide that information. It's going to block these things and also obfuscate your email behavior so that these companies can't actually get this information from how you are using your device. So that's quite nice in terms of that's being built in by default. There's another thing that's also built in, and this is also new to iOS 15, but this one is specific to anyone that has upgraded their iCloud accounts. So essentially, if you've got iCloud Plus, which means you've got at least 50 gigs, of storage on your device, of upgraded storage, then essentially you've upgraded to iCloud Plus. So one of the features you get there is called Hide My Email, right? So Hide My Email is pretty cool because what it allows you to do is essentially use a dummy email address when you sign up for things like newsletters or even for subscriptions and services. So you don't have to give in your real email address. And it's kind of nice in terms of, I think, a lot of spam coming to that address, because as soon as you share this address, widely and sign up for so many things, I think unfortunately that email address gets part of mailing lists and whatnot. So it's nice actually to not have your email address widely known. So how does this work? How do you hide your email address if you wanted to do that? Let me show you. I'm going to go into Safari real quick, and we're back into News 24 just because they have a subscribe option, I guess. So as soon as I go into it, it says subscribe onto News 24. If you wanted to do this, for instance, there's an option for me to now start the process by enabling or inserting my email address. So check what happens as soon as I tap on there to start, adding my email address. I can do that. But we can also do, as you can see towards the bottom of the screen, kind of right on top of your keyboard, you'll see there's an option that says hide my email, right? So this is pretty cool. Check it out. If I tap on that, what it's going to do, it's going to actually tell me I'm using iCloud Plus, and it's going to give me a random email address. You can see there, T's sending iCloud.com, and you can kind of change that if you want to kind of maybe have another one. You can kind of tap on that little button there and kind of refresh a few times. If you want to find something maybe that makes more sense, but the point is it doesn't have to make sense because this is like really a random email address. So what will happen is in this case, News 24 will get that as your email address. It'll still come to you, right? So all their messages will still come. It'll get forwarded to your actual email address. But if you ever wanted to, let's say, stop your subscription and you don't want them to still have your email address on their database, well, if you're using this option, you just kind of then delete this hide my email option that you've created. And essentially, it's like they never had your email address to start with, right? So if you want to see all the ones that you have done like that, so you can also do this. For instance, if you go into iCloud, so what you do is you go into the settings app, you head over to your iCloud account, you go into where it says iCloud, and you'll see there's an option that says hide my email. So this will show you all the ones that you had signed up for already. So if you wanted to remove them, this is essentially where you can do that. It might take a second to load there. You can see a few ones that I've got here. So it's like a test one there, and you can then go and, deactivate that email address. Let's do this. This was a test one, so I might as well deactivate it. And, there we go. So easy as that. Let's see. I see there are a few things coming in on the chat. Someone's saying, how do I close the same time pages of Safari? How do I close same time pages of Safari? I'm not sure, Komoto, maybe just want to clarify your question there for me, and we'll see if we can get an answer to you. All right. So hide my email, that's quite a nice one, and that is also new. Talking about being more secure and more private as you are browsing the web, maybe something to consider is also, which search engine you are using. So I think by default, all of you are using Google, I'm sure. There is also an option to change that, to change your default search engine away from Google. And actually, there's an option called DuckDuckGo. So if you head into your settings app and you go to Safari, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, you head over to search engine. You can change it away from Google to something like Yahoo, there's Bing, but also there's one called DuckDuckGo. And DuckDuckGo is really a privacy-focused search engine. So, that's a privacy-first option here. And essentially, they pride themselves in that they don't keep any information in terms of the user's history, right? So again, if you're wanting to go for the ultimate in terms of, web privacy, then you might want to consider something like DuckDuckGo as well, because we're not even Google, right? They are also a company that is very ad driven. So essentially what they're doing is also they're building a profile in terms of how you use their services. And you can also bypass that by using another service like one of these here. All right, so more to chat about. And this is got to do with the App Store. So if I go out of the settings app there for a second, there's also some great things included in the App Store to help you see what apps have access to, and kind of like a little bit of a privacy, I guess, label. So just like when you're buying a food item, you know what's inside of it before you kind of want to consume it. Similarly, in terms of installing applications, you want to make sure you kind of know what is maybe some of the things that this application will be maybe tracking, right? What are some of the privacy, I guess, settings available? So how do I know what kind of apps kind of will be able to access? Well, I can go onto the App Store, and it actually will tell you, all right? So this is required by Apple for all developers. So app developers have to submit this information. So for instance, if we do a search for something like, let's go with WhatsApp, very popular messaging application, as you would probably know. A lot of people using this. So as I look at this page on the App Store, you can see there's normal information in terms of some screenshots and whatnot. As I keep on going down, you'll see there's an option that says App Privacy. And this is where it shows you data linked to use. So all the things, and you can also go on where it says show details. It's really going to give you all the information, right? So it's nice to see kind of just what this app will be kind of required in terms of using their application. So that's WhatsApp. You can see there's a whole bunch of things that WhatsApp would be tracking based on you using it. If you go to a more privacy-focused messaging application, something like Telegram or Signal, let's quickly see how they are different. So if I go into Signal Messenger, for instance, let's go into that app's information page. And if I scroll down here, you can see, well, if I look at data linked to you, well, not a lot, right? So you can see again, and this is just, again, nice for you to be able to see this information as you are making your choices when you are downloading different applications, to make sure that maybe also you're starting off with an application that is more privacy focused from the start. All right, so someone's saying, please repeat how to get the default DuckDuckGo. So while I am in demo mode, let me quickly show you. So definitely, so you go into your settings app, and you just want to go out until that, let's go into the main menu. And as you scroll down, you'll see an option for Safari. So it should be here towards the middle. There we go, Safari. And you're going to have an option then to change your search engine. You can see right on top there, it's Google at the moment. That's kind of the default, but you can change that to DuckDuckGo. And if I now go back to Safari, and let's say you make a new tab, and you do a search now. So let's just search for, I don't know, Apple, and do a search. It's actually going to use, let's wait for it a second. You'll see, hopefully, it's going to give you the DuckDuckGo interface. There we go. You can see it's DuckDuckGo. And they've also got an app, as they are suggesting that you want to do. All right, so I hope that helps in terms of just how to get your default search engine. All right, so let's talk about a few interesting things real quick in terms of using third-party apps, because I think we touched on this earlier when we looked at all the settings that you can change on an app-by-app basis. So for an app like Facebook, for instance, you can go and limit in terms of what the app has access to, right? In terms of your microphone, your location, etc. So the other thing to consider, though, as you're using some of these third-party apps and services is also to be sure to then use the app, because you can control more of the app. So if you use, for instance, Facebook on the web, right? So as you can see here, it is in Safari, all right? Essentially what happens often, and you can maybe check on your side, is maybe you've gone onto Safari and you've accessed Facebook, and maybe you've then left and you've kind of done something else, but you never actually logged out of Facebook, which means you actually permanently signed into Facebook on the browser, right? So I think the advice here is just double check that you've not signed into Facebook, let's say in the browser, because then what can happen is, as you can see at the bottom there, it's kind of a random piece of text there, but this is the help article from Facebook that says whenever you actually then visit a website that's got a like button on it, right? Or like social integration, Facebook will know about your visit. So again, from a privacy point of view, just make sure then you rather use the app, because then you can control all these things about the app. Essentially, the app is sandboxed, so you can tell it not to be able to do this and that. And then also at the same time, maybe make sure that you're not signed in the browser, because that's also going to maybe defeat the purpose a little bit there, right? So I see someone is saying, will the recording of this be available? Yes, for sure. So we will have this on our YouTube channel on iStore Meets, hopefully not too long after the session today. All right, so what I just mentioned actually doesn't just apply to Facebook. So kind of the same goes for apps like Google. So if you're using things like YouTube and Gmail and all the different Google services, again, there's apps available for all those different things. And the advice is, rather than accessing your Gmail, let's say in the browser, which means you have to sign into that and potentially then stay signed in, is rather have the Gmail app, which you can then control in terms of some of those settings. And also, if you actually look at what Google says here in terms of some of their policies, they will know if you, for instance, the terms you search for, the videos you watch, the purchases you make, things you interact with. So that is if you are signed in to them or those services permanently. So probably just a bad idea not to be signed in the background. Right. Also want to mention, because obviously we're not going to go into all the specifics of all the different apps, but let's talk about WhatsApp again real quick, because it is a very popular messaging app. And there's one thing to be aware of in terms of the settings within WhatsApp when it comes to some of the privacy options. And again, if you go into then WhatsApp and you head over to the settings part, you'll see there's an option for account and then privacy. And you'll see there's a few things there that you can either have as available to everyone, which means anyone can essentially access that information, or maybe only your contacts. And I think the suggestion again is to change a lot of these things to be only available to your contacts, including something like your profile photo. You're saying, well, why would I do that? Well, essentially, if you think about it, your telephone number, you probably jot this down many different places. If you go into a building and you kind of jot down in a register book, or, kind of various places, you probably have your phone number down. So essentially, if anyone then has your phone number, they can almost then have a photo of you if they kind of use WhatsApp to see what your profile photo is, unless you change the setting to be contacts only. So it's up to you really. But I do know of actually someone that had it happen to them, where someone, took their photo from WhatsApp and then started messaging other people that they know, kind of pretending to be them, right? Kind of a bit of an imposter there. I'm not sure what the end goal was, but essentially you can make sure that does not happen. So I see Sharmi is asking, hi, if I don't close tabs, it means my privacy is compromised. Tabs like Instagram, WhatsApp, and even though I opened from there. No, so I think what we're saying is if you are signed into the browser of some of those services, like if you're logged into, let's say, Facebook or something like that in the browser, and you don't sign out, essentially the service, something like Facebook, will be able to kind of track your activity as you kind of browse the web. So that's why we're saying rather make sure that you use an app like Facebook, and you can leave it open in the background. That's not a problem. That's not the issue. As long as you've also then, if you're comfortable with some of the settings when it comes to some of those privacy ones we looked at right at the beginning. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to another part of our session here, which is a little bit about, some tips and tricks for being security savvy, right? These are like a little bit more general, I think, in terms of you going about your day-to-day life and using your iPhone then, maybe as you are traveling and connecting to Wi-Fi in various places, etc. So let's talk about some of those things just to make sure we are nice and knowledgeable about these things. And the first one, and this is what you kind of, I think, need to just be aware of, is that, and you've probably seen some of these already on your device, because I think it's just so prolific. But for instance, phishing, right? So this is when you get these messages, and they usually come in via text message or email. And essentially, they're trying to trick you into clicking on that little link that they give you so that they can get your username and password by you then essentially giving it to them. So phishing is when a company pretends to be, or like an SMS like this pretends to be something that they're not. So this is, as you can see here, from Luno. But it's actually not from Luno because I actually don't have a Luno account, but I still got this message. So if you were kind of maybe didn't pay attention too much, you just clicked on that link, you'll probably go and arrive at a website that looks like, let's say, a Luno website, and you can go and put in your username and password. But actually what you're doing is you giving someone here that is trying to get information directly, right? You're actually giving it to them in their hands. So I think the advice is, don't click on like links that you get via SMS and email from untrusted, sources, even if they pretend to be something like this. Rather go directly, if you want to go, let's say, and update your Luno account, rather go and head over to their website directly versus getting there from a link like this. And they come in different forms and sizes. For instance, here's one that came in supposedly from Apple, right? And this happens quite often as well if you lose, let's say, your iPhone and someone else is now trying to access your iPhone. They can't get into your device because there's a few things actually that Apple has implemented. One of them is called activation lock, which means even if someone wipes the software on that iPhone, maybe that they found, they still can't actually use the device. It's still linked to your account. So what they might sometimes try and do is then try and trick you into kind of saying, well, we found your device, right? Please click here and enter your Apple ID so we can, track it and get it back to you. But essentially, again, you will be giving the information straight to the people that you don't want to give it. So just be aware of phishing. What they do is they send out literally thousands of these little emails and WhatsApps, I guess, or SMSs maybe rather. And they hope just to get a few people in to fall for their tricks, right? So important just to be aware. They also come in form of an email, as you can see here. And usually they try and kind of scale a little bit in terms of, click here because there's a security issue, or maybe there's a transaction that's pending or something, and kind of you maybe just didn't think for a second, and you clicked on the link. So kind of just be aware for those. If you are browsing the web, so let's say you are using your phone just to browse the web, what you might also find sometimes is you end up on sites that are not secure. So actually Safari will tell you this. If you look at the little, the message in the browser there on top, it says not secure. So this is not something to necessarily be worried about because many sites are not secure. If you're just going, in this case, like a planetarium website, there's no need for them, I guess, to be secure. But what you want to be aware of is that you're not going to be doing anything like that requires maybe some confidentiality on a website that is not secure. So for instance, you're not going to be entering credit card information on a website if it's not secure, or maybe banking information, or anything that you would consider to be confidential, right? Because essentially that information is not encrypted, which means someone that is intercepting that traffic between you and the ultimate server that is going to can then gather some information that's being sent in the meantime. So be aware of this in terms of just using your device and browsing the internet. For most websites that you do go to, that is going to be financial websites like maybe FMB or anything that is going to be requiring security, you'll see that little padlock on the top of the screen there, which will show you that it is actually encrypted and a secure website. So just something to also just be aware of as you are browsing the web, right? Okay, so let's talk about passwords, maybe a little bit, spend some time on that, and accounts. And one of the things that actually is also built into your device is something called iCloud Keychain. So iCloud Keychain essentially is a place that firstly generates passwords for you, very random and long and really strong passwords. So that's the first thing it does. And secondly, it stores it for you. Because I think the problem with passwords, and maybe you'll agree here, a lot of people, it's a mission to kind of just keep on making passwords, right? So what a lot of people do is they have a weak password, which is not a good idea, or they kind of reuse the same password for all the different services and sites that they sign up for, which is even a worse idea. So by using iCloud Keychain, essentially it'll generate one for you, and also it'll save it then in your iCloud. It'll encrypt it and also make it available across your different devices. So it's very kind of easy to use, and I think that's the point, right? It takes away the hassle of passwords. So iCloud Keychain is definitely there. By the way, once you have saved a password in iCloud Keychain, it does it automatically. So once you go to that website again, it'll just really allow you to enter in your details or fill it in for you once it's verified it's you using either Face ID or Touch ID. But if you wanted to kind of just see what those passwords are, and maybe if you wanted to check out a few things, you can actually go in manually and see where they are and where they're stored. So if you go into the settings app, you'll see it's right there. Actually, it says passwords. It's going to ask for your Face ID, as you can see. And it's going to show you all the sites on this demo account, for instance, that I have signed up for, right? So for Adobe and Dropbox and Facebook, etc. So, but really what I wanted to show you here, more importantly, is you'll see on the top there, it says security recommendations. So, so this is something you can do on your device, because obviously in this one, I don't have a lot of passwords. It's just a demo device. But if you go into security recommendations, it'll show you if there are any of your username and passwords that's been part of a breach. So not on your side, maybe the company that you've signed up for, they had a breach. So maybe that's how maybe that information got leaked. It'll show you if that happened to a site maybe that maybe you have an account with, or maybe if you just really have a really bad password, it's not strong enough, it's really just easy to guess. It'll actually give you that recommendation here, so you can take action and hopefully just update your passwords if you need to, right? Okay, so on top of that also, there's another great function which kind of allows you not even to have to use a password, because it'll just use your existing iCloud account when you sign in with Apple. So for instance, if I go to Dropbox here, instead of me signing in with a brand new account and maybe having then to give those details, I can just say, well, sign in with Apple. So this is something that I guess you would have seen signing with Google, signing with Facebook, although Apple, again, is taking a little bit more of a security first, privacy first stance here. So, so they have built in some extra functions here to make it more secure. For instance, if you sign in with Apple like this, by default, it is going to hide your email, right? So it's going to generate one of those random email addresses we've seen earlier already, and it's going to just use that almost to generate a sign-in login for you. So it makes it a little bit easier, I guess, because you could also go and say, okay, well, sign in with a new account and then hide your email like we've seen earlier, right? But kind of this will just going to do it for you automatically. So it'll use your Apple ID almost as a way to authenticate, but then it'll kind of have this extra email address that it's created to kind of just make it a little bit more private on that front. So even if that company then does get compromised, so maybe there's a breach on that company's side, again, doesn't really matter to you because they don't have your actual email address. They just have this like burner one that hopefully you can then just discard. All right, so so that's signing with Apple, definitely something that you would have seen already, and something I would suggest also you use from a security and privacy point of view. A couple more things to chat about, right? So we've got a few more, less than 10 minutes left. So let's quickly wrap up with a few important last bits of information. And this one is about your SIM card. So if you have a SIM card in your iPhone, which you most likely will have, you'll know that there's also a SIM pin that you have to enter as you restart your phone. And then you've got your phone code, right? So there's those two codes that one unlocks your SIM card, one unlocks your phone. So a lot of people actually turn off the SIM one because, you know, you don't want to put in two passwords every time. So actually the advice is to make sure that you do have a PIN code on your SIM card, because for the simple fact, if your phone gets lost or stolen and someone removes that SIM card from your iPhone and maybe you've not had a chance to deactivate it yet, you know, they can essentially receive OTPs on that SIM card number. They can make calls, receive calls on that number. So from that point of view, it's really important to make sure that your SIM has a PIN code. And if you're not sure if this is turned on, I guess you'll know because every time you restart your phone, it'll ask you for that SIM PIN. But if you turn yours off, you can definitely go and turn it back on again just by heading over to settings and then mobile data and then to SIM PIN. Maybe just a little bit of word of advice. If you have not had used this for a long time, like I had done on my phone, when I changed the setting, you probably had forgotten what the original PIN was. So just make sure you don't block yourself out of your SIM card. You might want to rather chat to your service provider in that case. Okay, so let's talk about another important one, which is, you know, just, I guess, getting online using Wi-Fi. So obviously, if you're at home, if you're at work, you know, those are trusted Wi-Fi connections. You know, they are kind of set up either by yourself or by your company, and hopefully there's some measures already in place on both those sides. But if you connect to a Wi-Fi at, I don't know, a coffee shop or a hotel or a restaurant or even a mall or the airport, then it is actually, you're putting yourself a little bit at risk here in terms of, because you don't know what you are connecting to, right? So it might say free airport Wi-Fi there, but it is actually simple just to make a random Wi-Fi network that says free airport Wi-Fi. And anyone can do this, really sit in the airport and essentially then have people connect via their device. So essentially you're going to connect to an unknown source, and they can potentially then intercept your data. So I'm not saying this is the case for many of these networks. Many of them are secure and set up the correct way. But the point is, you don't always know what you're connecting to, because again, if it says Jimmy's Coffee Shop Wi-Fi, you might not be sure if it is Jimmy's Coffee Shop's actual Wi-Fi. And secondly, you might not be aware of how secure they have set up their network to protect your information. So I think the advice is avoid using this if you can, right? So rather use your own personal data, maybe top up if you need to. And if you really need to connect to a public Wi-Fi for whatever reason, then also just be aware in terms of, kind of don't do your banking, for instance, and things that are of a more secure nature. Rather stick to maybe just, reading some news, that probably would be fine. By the way, if you wanted to, you can also actually increase your security, even if you are connecting to unsecured Wi-Fi networks like these random ones, by installing a VPN app on your iPhone. So this is maybe not for everyone. This is, I guess, for those looking for the ultimate privacy and security, because what a VPN app does on your iPhone, essentially, it is going to encrypt all the information from your device. It's going to send it via a kind of a separate server, which the VPN application will then use. And essentially, all the information will be encrypted between your phone and that that third-party server. So this is something you can use. For instance, a lot of people use this also to change the locations, because you can then essentially appear to be, let's say, in America if the VPN is based in America, right? But from a privacy point of view, it really is important from just the encryption point of view, right? I think important to mention here is there's a lot of VPN apps available on the App Store. So what you might want to do is just make sure that you don't go with the first and the best one. There are also free ones available. You actually want to go with one of the like more, I guess, reputable ones of companies that actually you can probably have to pay for these usually. But similarly, if you just go for the first and the best one, then it's actually you kind of defeating the purpose a little bit, because you don't actually know who this company is and you're connecting via their server, right? So there's a couple of more established ones, probably something like ExpressVPN. There's Surfshark. There's Proton, as you can see here. These are some of the more, I guess, established ones. But I think my advice is just do a little bit of research, maybe on your own as well, to just see which are the better ones to use. All right. So, and maybe one last point here is you might actually already have access to a VPN, because especially if you're working from home and you're still accessing the company's, let's say your company's servers directly, maybe they've given you access to their VPN, which means in that case, you're using the company VPN, which is similar, right? It's going to, again, encrypt information. So maybe you already got access to a VPN and your company has given this to you. So in that case, you can also use that. I'm thinking. All right. So final things maybe to chat about is maybe the built-in service called Find My iPhone, or just Find My. And the reason I'm kind of bringing it up here is not so that you can go and hunt down your iPhone if you had lost it, but that it actually has got some other useful features built into the service as well. One of them being that you can remotely wipe your device. So if you, for instance, had lost your device and you are pretty sure that maybe it's not going to be recovered, then unfortunately in that case, what you can do then is you can say, well, maybe let's remotely wipe it and then make sure whatever is stored on that device is actually wiped completely using a remote wipe. By the way, something new that's with iOS 15 as well, and this is kind of cool, is that you can still track your phone even if it's turned on, or turned off. So if let's say your phone is lost or stolen, and even if the battery dies, you'll still be able to track it, right? Because it's still actually going to emit a little very low power Bluetooth signal. And anyone else walking past your phone essentially will then pick up that signal with another iPhone and then allow you to still be able to hopefully get your phone back. All right, so with that being said, we've kind of come to the end of our session. So thank you very much for joining. I hope there's one or two things that you picked up here that you can use in your day-to-day, I guess, going about with your iPhone, and to get you more private, more secure, and essentially to keep the data that is already private to keep it private, right? Which is the goal. So if you want more information, though, you're welcome to reach out to our cybersecure team. So there is the email address on the screen at the moment, and they'll be able to give you more information. So welcome to do that. And then other than that, yeah, we've got more sessions, as you know. So definitely go and check out on our website and book for other sessions. We'd be happy to host you to talk about some other topics as well.